Let's return to one of our top stories. A new study claims that the oil and gas giant ExxonMobil correctly predicted the global climate impact of fossil fuels decades before it acknowledged the risks. Arise correspondent Lakwe Olarinoye has been monitoring developments, and she joins us now from London for more. Lakwe, good to see you. I think it's still okay to say Happy New Year to you. Now, what does this research reveal? Happy New Year.
Well, what we do know that is for the last 50 years, from about the 1970s, documents that have now been found that was actually researched by ExxonMobil scientists at the time, found that they discovered all those years that actually they were going to contribute above 0.2 C to the atmosphere, which is a significant amount. And they were saying at that time that if they continued to burn fossil fuels, that they were going to produce that every decade. And now, of course, 50 years later, we know what that picture looks like. We know how bad climate change is. And even those of people that don't want to accept that the climate is getting warmer have seen, just look at, the summers we've had and the winters we've had and all the kind of extreme weathers we've had around the world in the last couple of years. And so this really puts ExxonMobil in a really tough position, that if they did know that these documents existed, then why have they not, one, made it public, and two, why have they not done anything significant to reduce how much contribution they're making to climate change? So it's a very shocking revelation, which, by the way, they've strongly denied and said that, people are cherry picking, in their own words. This is a kind of cherry picking revelation. But actually, like I said, scientists have researched this and analysts have now looked at those documents, which have suggested that they could potentially be complicit.
And that's exactly where we want to go with the conversation next is, how complicit could ExxonMobil really have been in contributing to climate change? There's one aspect of concealing information, and then, there's the global contribution that several companies and global conglomerates have made to make this problem worse. So how much of this responsibility can we really put on ExxonMobil?
It's a really good question that you asked there, because this data is just for ExxonMobil. So, of course, you cannot make them solely responsible for global warming, because you and I know that, it's not just big companies that contribute, but also our lifestyles contribute to the climate warming every year. But what's so stark about this revelation is that 0.2 C is a significant amount. And to know that you were going to contribute to that every decade for over 50 years now is, there should be some sort of corporate social responsibility there. Now, it is also worth noting here that this is not the first time information like this has been revealed, but it's the first time that researchers have had access to ExxonMobil's data and internal documents, if you like. So there's stark evidence that they did know. They still deny that, of course, but to answer your question, does that make them complicit? If that data is certainly correct, and if scientists are saying, look, the information is there and we can see and corroborate that, then there is some sort of responsibility from them. But of course, it's a shared responsibility, because how do you then measure how much they've actually contributed to on a yearly basis, or even in the last decades? And then, of course, you have to compare that to how much everybody else has contributed. So yes, they are partly complicit. Whether they're totally complicit for global warming, of course, is a separate discussion and requires more research.
Well said, Lakwe. And I'm curious, you said Exxon has denied how much they knew, and this report is obviously the opposite. But where do we go from here, regardless of who says what they knew or what they didn't know? What happens next?
So again, really good question. I think at this point, it becomes like this is a very corporate kind of social responsibility issue, really. You can't really pin people down for knowing how much they contributed, because then we could go around arresting everybody. Like, we all live lives that haven't really contributed to. It means that what happens with this documentation? There are going to be more eyes looking at what ExxonMobil is doing. We do know so far that a lot more bigger investors, for example, HSBC said last month that they weren't going to be investing any longer in any kind of land or investment into oil fields. So there is a kind of response coming and growing to many of those kind of big companies that are contributing, especially fossil fuel companies. There's been a response to that. Where do we go from here? Again, it's one of those questions. Where do we go with climate change? I mean, if we don't adopt new lifestyles and change the way in which fossil fuels are used and the way in which they're consumed, then this problem is going to get worse. But there should definitely be an onus on companies that are contributing to, a disaster across the globe.
Absolutely. Very well said. Arise correspondent Lape Olarinoye. Thank you so much for your time and your insight on this.